Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. At the time of recording, she has 22,570 photos and 1,385 videos on her iPhone, 80% are dog-related, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Now, last week on the show, I was sharing a phrase that I recently discovered and I'm geeking out on, and it's called constructive delusion. In that episode, I share how I'm using that phrase to underpin my 2021 plans as well as my 5 and 10-year goals. Now, this week we have a very special guest on the show who I met during a 20-week consulting gig last year. I was very lucky enough to be placed in a team with him, and I say that because when you talk to him, it feels like you're sitting in the front row of a TED Talk. And I don't mean that you're being spoken at, but it's more a case of you instantly feel inspired to do better when you're in his presence, and no doubt you'll pick up on that in this episode. His name is Daniel Kerr. He's a physio turned high-performance coach, and he'll share that transition story with you on this show. Dan's coaching company is called Exceptional Self Coaching, which you can find on the Instagram at exceptional_self_coaching. This conversation actually reminded me of a word I learnt in Year 12 English class. Our teacher, Mr. Matthias, he gave us a task on Friday afternoon and he said, look, I want you to all go home and over the weekend, just grab a dictionary, this is back in the day obviously, and I want you to find out what the word watershed means. Being a pretty diligent student back then, I looked it up. So geographically, watershed means a ridge like that formed by a chain of mountains which sends water to two different rivers on either side. And it's from this meaning that watershed came to mean a turning point or a dividing line in our lives. So what it is, it's a turning point or a historic moment. And what I like about this episode is Dan shares that watershed moment that happened to him, which was in the form of a Christmas present. And I'd love you to reflect on that word too. Can you reflect back on your life and what have been those pivotal, those watershed moments that have really led you to what you're doing now? This episode comes with a warning. If you're not interested in being inspired, then turn it off right now. But if you do want to reflect on where you're at, your mindset, your habits, and committing to growth this year, as well as Dan's facilitation and preparation tips, then you'll absolutely love this conversation. And of course, when the show is over, you can join our community of over 1,100 facilitators from all over the world on the free Facebook group called The Flip Chart. And if you want to support the show and my idea creation daily over a coffee, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Leanne Hughes. There's a link to everything mentioned in the show as well as Dan's contact details. So reach out, let him know what you learnt from this conversation. Those are in the show notes over at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 155. Now, on to the show. I'd like to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Daniel Kerr. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Cheers, Leanne. Thanks for having me. Grateful to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I think it's really good timing having you on the show. For those that want a bit of inspiration, a bit of a hit for the start of their 2021, that's certainly what I get when I talk to you. Can you share with our listeners a bit about your story, some defining moments, and the work that you do today?
Yeah, definitely. So likewise, very, very inspired when I met you, and I've really enjoyed the conversations we've had. My story is a bit of a simple one, really. I am a physiotherapist, just no longer practicing. I was working at a clinic, and I'd actually applied for a senior position, and I was unlucky and didn't get that. And at that time in my life, probably went about the decision the wrong way. I would apply what I now know as a fixed mindset. I was blaming others for why I didn't get it, and just trying to seek validation, even though the reason that I'd been given was just lack of experience, which, was something that I could just not really make peace with and accept at the time. My brother sort of noticed that I was going through what I would call a bit of a down patch. And for Christmas, he actually gave me a high performance planner. At this stage, I didn't really know much about personal development, wasn't much into leadership.
So when you got the book, were you like, what the hell is this?
Well, very much, yeah. I was like, well, that's awesome. Thanks for giving me a diary because, that's what I thought it was. And I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I can structure my thoughts a bit better. reading through it, it sort of opens with a bit of a story about the creator, Brendan Burchard, and everything just clicked for me with that. From understanding what he does, I started reading his books. I started following him on YouTube, social media, watching all the free stuff that he offers. And then, like a true leadership guru, he actually says, if you want to know more, enroll into this. And I guess that's where I sort of made peace with the idea that it can be quite scary jumping in, because you always, in today's society, are a bit afraid of being ripped off with scams, and you're not knowing what you're going to get. And they use the old cliche, you get in what you put in, you get out what you put in. And, until I'd actually done it and committed, I was also a bit skeptical, but I jumped in and started with his course, which led me to a coach who literally just elevated me from a physiotherapist to in a corporate position, and then put me on the pathway of coaching. And it's just been sort of nonstop since. I've been just craving any sort of high performance type literature. I read and listen to a lot of the high performers in the world, the Tom Billius, the Jim Quicks. I do the course with the Grant Cardones. I know you and I have had a discussion about Gary Vee.
Yeah, love
and
the guy.
It's revolutionized the way I operate. And now I seem to just absolutely love learning, and just want to know how I can get more, learn more, and just do better.
Wow, it's amazing how getting a gift was that pivotal moment.
It was incredible. And it sort of sings, like it resonates with me in that sense that, even though you can try and remain closed and, like I say, in that sort of fixed mindset and not wanting to grow, the world will still give you those options to choose from and to pick. But you've just got to start creating a little bit more awareness. And I would dare say that following that, my awareness and intuition has really, really developed.
It's interesting because a lot of the time on the show I ask facilitators, because I guess the aim of what we do is we want to create change. So if someone comes into our workshop, we want them to walk away feeling inspired, but then taking action. And often we seem to fall flat where it's like they feel great, but then they leave a workshop and the change doesn't happen. So I'm curious around that whole, you had a fixed mindset, this tangible item that was given to you in this moment changed something in the way that you think. What was it about the way that Brendan spoke or wrote or taught that really resonated with you?
It's a great question, and I say that because a lot of people who knew me go, "What's changed and what was it?" And when I tell the story of the diary, they go, "No, come on, be realistic." And I honestly believe that it's just Brendan just ignites a fire within to want to do better. He opens up the possibility that things are always going to happen in life, and things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And when you make that acceptance, you can really start to understand that you have a choice. You can either react or respond. And Brendan talks about a process. He says, in order for things to change, something new either comes into your life or something new comes from within. And things are always going to come from externally. We just look at the past year, and it's just been something that has derailed, a lot of people. It's just been a really, really challenging year. But you have an option there to actually accept and just lie down with defeat. And just, give in to the masses of just being negative, not looking for any kind of outlook and trying to improve yourself. Or, you can accept and say, no matter what happens, I'm still going to show up as my best self. How would I be my best self in this situation? How can I live into this moment? And how can I carry myself to be that top performer that I know I can be?
It's an interesting phrase that you say, show up. I really resonate with that phrase. I find a lot of people, and even myself, questioning, what does it mean to show up as my best self? What does that even look like? And I think sometimes we also play a bit too small by looking at, I guess, our peers or maybe someone that's a little bit ahead of us. And I guess the beauty of podcasting and YouTube is that you get to see people that are just killing it in whatever space they're in and going, wow, that is possible. What is showing up as your best self? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, reflection is a massive, massive point there. And one of the big things that I've learned about is how to measure my progress and reflect and accept that if you don't get something right the first time, that is not failing, that's learning. That is a mindset shift that you have to make peace with. And it's as simple as you couldn't walk the first time you tried. You fell over and you kept trying and you kept trying. If you just accepted falling over the first time you tried to walk, we would all be crawling. We would never have walked. I know that sort of makes it very simple, but that's really all it is. You want to represent the best version of yourself. So when you go into a situation, it's a little for me, I set up triggers. So if I'm walking through a door into a meeting or something like that, or if I'm going to facilitate or lead a program, I have a trigger. And when that door closes, it's game on time, and let's deliver the best version of how I want to be. And even if it doesn't go perfectly, which things don't always do, people are always going to give you feedback. And the best thing about feedback is you have an option on how to take it. If you choose to take it personally, that's okay. But you need to also accept that those people are just going to challenge your growth. And what I say if there is a bit of a personal feedback, look at it from the perspective of thank you for challenging me to do better. You can never please everybody, and I don't suggest you try to do that. But everyone's entitled to their opinion, and it's how you receive that feedback and implement it that really will take you to that next level.
Yeah, so true. And I think, this podcast is called First Time Facilitator. Now, in order to become a great facilitator, you do have to fail and flop. And none of us likes that. It's uncomfortable. The whole reason behind the show, and I'm sorry for any listener that's listened into this story, but I was in Canada and I just completely failed one afternoon at a workshop. A guy just refused to participate, and it just went, it was awful. And so I was up all night thinking, what the hell should I have done differently? And when I got back to Australia, rang all my friends and asked them. That's how this show began. But it began out of a really crappy moment in a workshop that sort of, the reflection piece was very powerful for me, but also had a sleepless night and was dreading going back the next day. But I think that uncomfortableness, that awful moment is what's brought, even us having this conversation today and listeners tuning in and hopefully building their facilitation skills.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be the uncomfortable that we actually have to become comfortable with.
Why can't it be the good stuff? We learn more from the bad stuff.
Of course. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. We have that. And I think if we look at things and we don't look at things with that optimistic outlook on how I can do better, we start to judge. And we let judgment rule everything we do. And the problem with that is it creates excuses. And the danger with excuses, if we tell ourselves them enough, we validate them. And that really puts us in an area where it's a difficult and slippery slope to get out of.
I heard on a podcast a guy say, he was talking about the word rationalize. And if you break it down, it's rational lies. Those excuses that really, because it's like when you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, it's raining out there. I should just go back to bed. And then within a minute, you've just convinced yourself that that's a good idea. You've
100%.
rationalized it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fear of being judged, and in the context of starting a brand new year. We've just come out of this. I'm sick of people. I say it all the time. It's a crazy, challenging time, but it's true. We have. I think a lot of us think that the second it turns to 2021, things are going to be great again. What needs to shift for us in order to make it a better year?
Yeah, listen, 2020, that's a year that's going to stick with a lot of people. I dare say for worse reasons than good. And I started out 2020 with a workshop that Brendan ran on New Year's Day. And the outcome or the theme for 2020 for me was the year of clarity, 2020 vision. And wow, did that bomb, because it was just all of a sudden, it was just everything was turned on its head. However, in saying that, though, it has been still a very, very successful year for me. And I've actually enjoyed the success that I have had. I think if you're looking at 2021 as a new year, new me, and you're just sort of hoping that the transition from 2020 to 2021 is going to be great, you're probably not going to see that change. And you'll get that with any top really successful leader, high performer. The way to make that shift is action. And then I guess if you want to break it down even more, it's to have goals, to have an action plan, to review those goals as you're going, and to score yourself on how you're doing. Because that piece of reflection, and be honest, how are you showing up? How are you doing this year with work? How are you doing in your relationship? And if you sort of go, I'm killing it, I'm crushing it, fantastic, so how can you go better? Are there any areas of your life that maybe you aren't? And you really take a deeper dive in looking into that, because if we don't take any action, we just will sit and hope. And then again, we will start to judge, because it'll just be, this year is exactly like the last year. There's just no change. Bring on 2022.
Yes. It's funny that you say score yourself. So I was nodding along going, yep, tick, I'll set goals and I have an action plan. Yep, do that. Where I sort of fail, and this is funny because it's probably the way that I also deliver my workshops, I'll have like the goal and the action, deliver it, but then the reflection piece, I only really reflect when things haven't gone well. Like I will never actually go stop and go, hey, well done, like pat on the back. I won't acknowledge, just like, what's the next goal, and keep moving. The last time I did reflect, like I'm just thinking of that whole framework, was when I was playing netball, and I'd just like goal percentage and I'll put myself out of 5. And so I can do that, but I haven't really applied it to life. So how often do you do that? Is it a daily thing or?
It's a weekly thing for me, and it's set up in the planner as well. Like that's what I really love about it. I was always a very unstructured person, ADHD, sort of undiagnosed, but I think anyone that knew me, particularly my folks as a kid, like I was a pretty energetic kid, and I struggled to focus. And then I've found the value of routines. So implementing routines, and just coming out here to Brisbane from where I usually reside up in Moranbah, just waking up in a different place has completely shot my routine.
Yep.
It really does challenge you, because you fall into those routines and you know you have that to fall back on. So you don't go into that mindset of, oh, if I just lie and, that's a good idea. And you give in to that, to those excuses. So yeah, scoring myself, and it's nothing dramatic and nothing major, it's 1 out of 10, 1 out of 5, and it's all on you. And there is a daily little scorer that's at the end of the planner as well. And that's really why I love it, because you open your day with, what can I do today to make someone's day? And who do I need to communicate with effectively today? And then at the end of the day, it's like, what was the best part of my day? Why was this day so successful? If I could have changed one thing, and I've added in one piece there because I'm a massive believer in gratitude. And I write, obviously, and I have a gratitude journal, and I do that in the morning. It's part of my morning meditation. But in the afternoon, I sort of go, what are you grateful for? And it's as simple as, being able to come down to Brisbane as part of work. It's fantastic. Being honoured on this podcast, what an honour for me, just a little kid from South Africa now living in Australia. So those little scores there are great. And then what happens is, at the end of the week, I sort of use Sunday as a creative day. I think we've spoken about this and how we sort of set our weeks up. And then also at the end of the month, I refer back to my goals and sort of see how I'm going. And I think the other piece that's really important to note is that you don't actually have to tick off every goal. Sometimes you have to learn to step away. And again, it's not failure. And if you're calling that failure, you're judging again, but it's a path of learning. Maybe you took on too much. Maybe you're just overshooting at this time in your life. And, if you honestly believe that like life has a reason and things happen for the reason, it might not be that apparent right then and there, but you'll probably see later on that, oh, yep, I was just taking on way too much. And that was just probably a silly idea that I was never going to achieve. Like fun while I went down that path, but now I'm a bit more meaningful. And an example of that, for instance, is I really need to make sure that everything in my business and that is set up there. And then, whoop, your wife falls pregnant and suddenly you've got a child and you have to rearrange exactly how, and then your priorities fall, to being a father or a mother. So that's sort of an example of where you can just dial back on some of your goals, and new ones will come in. So new things come into your life and new things come from within. So it's that whole change piece again.
It is a change piece. And often when new things come into my life, I just add them onto the existing things that I'm already doing. And that is my problem. I get told a lot from people, like, you've got to stop saying yes. But I don't know, I get FOMO. And look, at the beginning of this year, I was really good and dedicated with journaling. Like I got this, awesome diary from Kiki K, and I was like in there and like writing notes. It was great for like January, maybe up to mid-February. Then COVID hit and I started like a COVID diary, and I was just like getting thoughts out and ideas. I can't even read it. It was just a way to get things out of my brain.
Yeah.
But now I've stopped. For some reason, I just can't continue this whole journaling thing. So how have you, you talk about routines, how have you managed to stick with this?
It's so funny, hey, like when I started working with this coach, we spoke about meditation, and this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe 8 months ago, and I didn't do it, didn't believe in it, didn't find value. I did other things, don't get me wrong. I exercised and, that kind of stuff. But I just didn't do it. And then I started to see the value in it. And I just really started to feel amazing from doing it. And I think the other piece that I really liked is I really like to challenge myself. And the hardest thing is with meditation is not letting your mind wander. I read the book by Mark Manson, The Subtle Art.
Yeah.
And I can't really remember if it was the first or the second one because I read both. Very entertaining. And we will both know he's quite a crass lad. But, he does write very well. And he says your mind will go to some weird places. And you need to understand that that's okay. Like minds are going to go. Like some people's will just run.
But like mine, I don't even realize it's gone until like 10 minutes later. Like, oh, I was meant to like think about nothing and like
that's
stop. Yeah. And then it's like, oh gosh, you don't even realize it's gone.
That's it.
Yeah. There's zero awareness.
Yeah. And so, that's formed. And I found that really does set up my morning. But before that is is I make sure I do exercise. Now, I'm not a big fan of exercise. I don't really particularly like exercise, but I love the feeling once I've completed it. And again, reading a few books, exercise is a lot easier to do when you do it in groups. You're a lot more likely to stick to it. So what we formed is a little exercise group where we live, and we get out. And don't get me wrong, it's really early, 10 to 4 in the morning, we're up and that. But it's so awesome that we get to do, and we got all levels. We got GMs, we got everyone, and we get out there and we give it horns. So I do exercise, I get home, I shower, I read for half an hour. Generally, a book that obviously I'm tackling at the moment. I try to read a book a week. Like, I'd love to stick to that, but sometimes I'm just not fast enough. Otherwise, some sort of inspirational type stuff. And some people read, scripture from the Bible, whatever tickles your fancy, really. And then I do meditation, and then I plan my day. And then I begin work.
Is this like a 2-hour thing? Like how?
So reading half an hour, meditation 10, 15 minutes.
Exercise.
And exercise for about 45 minutes. So, yeah.
My problem is I get home and my dog's like, what about us? And it's like, oh, I'm going to walk them. And then I get home and then it's like, oh, I feel like a coffee. And yeah, look, I'm there. I am making excuses. Yeah, I definitely, Hal Elrodie wrote a book, The Miracle Morning. Have you heard of that book?
No.
Yes, he talks about the sequencing, which is exercise, meditation, journaling. I can't remember the other two.
Cool.
That's quite good.
Yeah. I think I'm also just lucky that my wife she's not a morning person as well. So I can smash all that stuff out. She gets a bit grumpy when the alarm goes off at Sparrows, but she's made peace with that. And I try to sort of wake up before it so I can cut it, but I just set the alarm as a fallback. And then once I've done all that stuff and I've done my work for the day, I can have the afternoon with her, and generally we go for a walk and that kind of stuff, but it's to talk about her day, to talk about my day, to try not talk so much about work, but just invest in us, because as you'll know, Leanne, as a busy person, I hate the word busy, but we're very busy. And there's a lot of stuff on our plates, and you need to, in order to be successful, you need to make time in your relationship. And as a newly married person, I find that's going to be that's a routine that I have to set up.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we try to do that in the evening, which suits us both.
It's a good point you raise, because a lot of the time when I make a to-do list, it's all about like the business and the work. I got a speeding ticket. Oh, terrible. But it should be on my list to pay off, but it just sits on the table there. It's like, it needs to make the list. I mean, that's one example. I'm not really framing myself too well in this interview.
No, it's quite funny, because when I was walking out, I was actually thinking, should I tell this story as well? And then a few months ago, I got a speeding ticket as well. Yeah. And you get angry. You sort of like, oh my gosh, that cop and whatnot. And I was, again, making excuses, judgments, same thing.
Yeah.
And then I looked at Holly, who's my wife, and I said, you know what? I just need to slow down. What am I rushing for? There's no reason why we're going fast. And she said, yep. And it's sort of like, it was like a lightning bolt hitting me going,
interesting.
That's the realization. And that's the message.
Message.
It was a, expensive $250 with points message, but eventually I got it. And I think that's what I referred to earlier with the universe or life. It does throw you these messages. You just have to be intuitive and open and willing to receive them to see how you can progress.
So you talk about learning and picking up what the universe sort of throws down. So 2020 for us, I mean, I like how Gary Vee, you mentioned his name before. He says 2020 hasn't really changed anyone. It's just exposed who you really are. I found that fascinating, because I always thought I was someone that was like really great in adapting to change and like agile. And yet when things were happening, I'm like, oh my gosh, how will I adapt to this? And I didn't think I was adapting fast enough. This also brings into a point of, because I was looking at it on social media and people within my space that were like launching new programs and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm so far behind. Comparisonitis. I don't know if you've got an opinion on it or dealing with it, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, comparing yourself to others is something that we do as humans. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think it's always the right thing to do. If you want to be the top Olympic athlete, you've got to know that that's your competition and I'm going to be better than that. Rob Dial talks about the blue ocean and the red ocean and that kind of thing. So if you really want to be successful in an industry or a marketing sort of piece, and particularly probably any other areas, but that sort of areas I'm looking into at the moment, you don't want to be fishing in the same sort of industry trying to outdo the others. You want to find that niche.
Yeah.
And I think niches is really, really pertinent to marketing. And people might disagree with the way I look at this, but I would potentially say, niche could be your authenticity. And my wife is what I would call my marketing agent. And it's quite nice having her, because don't get me wrong, we fight. But what I love about it is she gives me the brutal feedback. So, if I do a video or do something, she goes, pretty average, Dan. And again, you go, crushed. But you go, so how can I improve it? And she says, be authentic. There's lots of people out there that are already doing it like this. What do people like and about you? What is it that you want to show? What is your message? And if you can find that authenticity, that niche, that's sort of the real pathway that we need to follow. And again, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it and we'd all be crushing it. But it's challenging.
It's really hard. Like, and myself included, when it goes to marketing, it's like they're all like, what's your uniqueness? And Seth Godin talks about the purple cow and just standing out in some unique way, like being that purple cow in the field.
I love that.
Have you read the book?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's great. He's awesome to follow if you want to look at niches and doing that. But everyone I talk to, like in part of my community or people that are marketing themselves, I often get questions like them asking me, hey, when you think of me, what words stand out for you? And everyone's trying to identify what makes them special and unique. It's fascinating, right? Because we're stuck inside our own brain that we can't recognize the value that we bring. So it's good you got that sounding board.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how you mentioned about those words, because that's another trick of Brendan's, and it's a very, very powerful coaching tool that I use with a lot of people. And you set up reminders on your phone, sort of words that are going to resonate with you to bring out that better self. If you're a bit of an impatient person, presence, might be a good one. And that is something for me. And one that I flash up is no judgment. Like I can be quite judgmental, and I know that's my flaw. It's not necessarily externally I'm judgmental, but internally, and that's probably almost just as bad kind of thing. So I have those words that flash up, and you can have them to remind you, and you'll change them as you go down your pathway and as you develop. But just they're very, very powerful, and they can help you to stay that line, to continually show up as your best self. You receive some bad news. We're emotional beings, humans. We can get angry, we can get sad, we can get defensive. The best thing to do is, obviously, everyone just says, take that breath and then step back and try and see it from what it actually is. My wife has a beautiful saying with people get really aggressive with emails, because you can never convey tone in email. So she says, read it with a smile. If you can read it with a smile and it still makes you unhappy or cranky, maybe there's something to it. But even then, she's like, go for a walk. It's just an email type of thing. So
yeah, I'm kind of laughing because I remember at my old job, I got this email and I was getting really worked up about it. Like, how dare they? And I showed it to my colleague, Jordana. I'm like, check this email out. Can you believe it? And she reads it. She's like, there's nothing wrong with it. And there was previous conversations with this person and that was all stacked. It just ruined my filter. I was just going nuts. By the way, I'm wearing my farewell present from my old job, and it's just a bangle, and it has the words breathe on it. So I've been told it's like my trigger word.
Brilliant.
Another good exercise for those listening based on what you said on trigger words, Michael Bungay Stanier does an exercise. It's called At My Best. So you just write At My Best up the top of a piece of paper and you write this, not that. So it's like leaning back versus leaning forward, never missing a beat, taking a breath. So yeah, I've got that piece of paper at home, and
awesome.
It's a good exercise too.
Just best practice stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. And so he mentioned that in our interview, and he does that before he facilitates a workshop. I think I've also written like high fives, not handshakes, just to put like that sort of playfulness. Yeah.
And I think the powerful things with these is they don't take long.
No.
And again, we hide behind the word busy. We're always so busy. We've got this time of year, Christmas and that, busy. But we say we don't have time for this type of thing. But this is how we develop. This is how we grow. Don't you think it's worth putting 5 to 10 minutes a day, maybe more, to grow, to develop? I'm still fascinated when I chat to people who tell me that they don't read books.
I get really judgmental.
Yeah. Again, I judge. Straight away I judge, and I just go, we both know that saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And like, how are you learning? I think if you're not reading.
We'll share an example just on, because we saw each other at the airport yesterday and we had a mutual colleague there, and he's like, how do you have time to like listen to these podcasts? And I'm like, well, what are you doing on the flight? He's like, I'm watching a Netflix Netflix movie I downloaded. I'm like, well, listen to a podcast. Like, that's it. We have the same amount of time. We're on the same flight. I'm going to be putting some great lessons through my ears, and not, again, being judgmental, but hey, that's why you love the show.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You asked, how do you do it? You say you make time for me. That's pretty much it. You put yourself first, because we far too often we put ourselves last. We only, like you said earlier, we reflect on the things that don't go well. We don't want to celebrate the success because there's this misconception that that's arrogance. And there's nothing wrong with celebrating success. That's not arrogant. That's what you've worked for. Is it arrogant for like Usain Bolt to celebrate after winning the Olympic gold? No, he's put in hours and hours of work. Like, I think it would look really weird if he just had his head down and shrugged it off. Celebrate the success. And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit in that space.
Yeah. So this guy that my business coach now, Alan Weiss, author of $1 Million Consulting, previous guest on the isolate the losses. So if you didn't get a gig, just say, right, this time of day with this client, I failed to make the sale, rather than just charging less or having that mindset generalize the success. It's an exercise that he talks about. So at the end of the day, similar to such a good, it's like,
yeah, and it's really, really confronting as well. Like, I'm in a business breakthrough group, and it's fantastic to meet so many like-minded people, and it's run by a guy, Rob Dial, and he says, which I think the material originally comes from Think and Grow Rich, which is, I just love those books that are narrated by those old school guys. You know, like, a lot of this stuff has been around for so long as well, which a lot of people don't realize. But back to the point, he talks about, if you want to run a business, he's like, what are you going to charge? What are you worth? And you go, couple hundred, maybe 1,000. He says, get specific, because if you don't know what you are worth, you are not going to be able to charge, and you're not going to make that.
Yeah.
And it just radiates through. And it's so true. And I think that's the thing that really challenges a lot of people, is the specificity of what they want to do. You'll ask them and you'll say, you know, what do you want to do? I want to own a house, and I just want to have like a family, and, you know, I want to be successful. So what does success look like? And they go, you know, like, own my own house, and what? And how do you get there? And I think that's the beauty of coaching, because you really challenge the people. You go, that's fantastic. So how are you going to go about it? And the other piece that I've loved and I've learned a lot with neuroscience, particularly after finishing physio, is that your brain will answer any question that you ask it.
That's scary when you think of the questions that you ask yourself. Yeah.
Your brain will find out it's the most powerful machine ever. And if you just ask the right questions, you will get the answers. But people tend to not ask the right questions. And the other piece that counts against us is that we were put together for survival, not for creativity, to excel, you know?
So escape from pain, like, basically, how am I going to survive this day at work?
100%.
Bad question.
100%. And you go back to your situation of lying in bed, and please don't think I'm calling Leanne lazy, because she's extremely fit and runs a lot. But, you know, lying in bed is a good idea. Your brain will say, yeah, that's a safe approach. Stay here, it's warm and comfy. Don't go out there. You don't want to face what's out there. But the reality is, when you do the exercise and the endorphins release, your brain's like, this is amazing, I feel fantastic. But we are geared to make those sort of negative or safe decisions, so we don't ask the questions that will promote our success or challenge us. But if we do ask those questions, our brains will start to find the answers. We'll just need to ask more and more questions.
Yeah, you're right, because we really want to preserve ourselves and probably the status quo as well. And I guess one question that I'm asking, it's from Jenny Blake, is how can I earn double the amount of money in half the time? Cool question.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is, but
no.
I'm just going to let that sit in the subconscious.
Yeah. And you start and a way to start figuring it out is to start asking yourself some journaling questions. What do you want to earn? What are you currently earning, and how long is it taking me? What do I need to change, type of thing? The point to how you figured out what you wanted to do, when you started this podcast, or if I said to you, like, let's go back 3-4 years ago, Leanne, you're going to do a podcast, you may not have known a single thing about it. So how did you learn?
I didn't even know what podcast was.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So how did you learn? You asked questions. You asked people, how do you go about it? You researched. You were asking yourself, so how do I go about this? What kind of mics do I need? What kind of cameras do I need? Where can I shoot it? Who should I get on it? What's my niche? How can I be different?
Actually, a good question when I give it, sort of people ask me for advice on podcasts, I'm like, well, one thing that's going to get you going is like the type of guests that you get on your show. So the number one thing I would do if you're looking at even starting a podcast is just write a list of your top 10 guests that if they said yes to being on your show, you'd like throw up from excitement.
Yeah.
And then Brilliant. The fact that I did that and I've had like half of them on the show.
Yeah.
It's such a great question, but it takes a bit of courage. So this is an isolated activity. I'm just writing in a spreadsheet on my own and I'm still editing it like before I even put their name down, like there's no way. If I'm not even confident to write their name on a spreadsheet that no one else is looking at, how would I ever get them on the show? So really, it's that whole just being brave with yourself, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And fear is a big thing. What most people are probably not aware of, the only sort of fears that are not learned are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises.
Yeah.
That is literally it. Everything else is a learned fear, you know. And there obviously, don't get me wrong, and God forbid this happens to somebody, but if you are taken hostage and someone points a gun, that's fear. We'll get that. But this is not my terminology. This is coined by Brendan. But fear, if you break it it down to its essential thing, it's often the fear of not being good enough. Like, why don't you start your podcast? Oh, I don't know anything about podcasts, but you could learn. But there's so many. You'll start thinking up excuses again because you don't think you're good enough to do it.
Well, yeah, it took me about a year to start.
Exactly.
Because of that.
Yeah.
For that very reason.
And because we're humans, we put such pressure on us to be perfect, and the reality is when everybody started, they were a hot mess. They sucked. And they kept working. And, I'm not saying you sucked, but like most people will be honest and go,
totally sucked.
Yeah. There you go.
Really?
Yeah. So the thing with fear is that you can break it down into really three sort of areas. It's the fear of loss or loss pain, process pain, and outcome. And, if you look at things like that, you start to realize that I can overcome those fears quite easily. So an example of loss is like, I don't want to go for that job interview because I'm afraid that if I get it, I will lose all my familiarity that I've had with my previous workmates, or I'll lose that office that I know so well. I will have to learn new systems, so I'll lose that familiarity. So, we hold back, oh no, I don't want to go for that type of stuff. So you go, well, how do you get through that? And you go, well, you flip it. So you go, what if you get that job and your office is the most schmick office in this new area where you overlook the ocean, you have an assistant. What if you meet people that are just going to change your life? For instance, like how we came together, like we had not known each other at all, hadn't heard about each other, and we've just like had such phenomenal conversations in the short time that we've worked together. So you really got to just flip it and take that challenge to go, okay, there is the what if, if I lose the familiarity in terms of loss, but this is also could be a great opening for me to just get so much better and go so much further and be so much better.
A lot of people ask me, how do I get more confident in public speaking? And they want like a hack. It's like, dude, just do more public speaking. Like get yourself in really uncomfortable situations, change the context every time. And a lot of people, really experienced facilitators on this show, still think that they're a first-time facilitator because it's a new context, new environment, and you're swept into that. So Dan, when you are running a workshop, what do you do beforehand to prepare?
I mean, the content and getting comfortable with the content is obviously very important. That's just sort of basics 101, because if you can't talk to it and sell it, then the audience is not going to understand it. The other piece is to be very careful that you pitch it at the right level. I'm a very, very simplistic guy. Sometimes it's actually embarrassing how bad I am at like mathematics, just because I think my brain runs in a different direction when I see numbers.
Do you think that's an self-talk thing?
100%.
Yeah, because I say 100%. I can't remember people's names. Like, well, that's why you can't.
Yeah, and I think at school I spent more time outside the classroom than inside, just because I had no interest in it. So preparation, you want to understand your content, but I think the piece that a lot of people don't really get the value in and actually really get the understanding is the visualization piece. And what I mean about that is I recently certified with a guy called Brian Kane, who's a mental performance mastery coach. And he works primarily with top athletes. And he's worked with recently there was a fight at the UFC and his fighter won her first sort of title fight. And when he was in the change rooms with her prior to the event, because you can imagine, okay, pre-COVID, you've got big crowds and that now they're walking out, it's a bit empty, it looks a bit weird, but there's still music, there's still those sort of periods where you're waiting around, particularly if you're the first fighter in, you're then waiting for the second one to come. What's going through your mind there? Like your mind will be going to all kinds of things. So he said to her, what are you going to tell yourself? And she goes, what do you mean? He goes, how do you want to focus for your fight before it starts? And she was like, I haven't really thought. He goes, okay, well, how about start small, finish strong. Start small, finish strong. Just a mantra.
That's awesome.
And,
great.
She actually mentioned it in the after-fight press conference. She didn't credit him, unfortunately, but he did take the snip for our monthly catch-up, because we've got a whole bunch of us performance coaches and we do a monthly catch-up. And he played the clip and he told us about it. And it's one of his pillars that he talks about. And it's the same sort of situation, when you want to deliver a facilitation, go into the room, go through the run through, practice it, because you really want to be comfortable with that environment. In case something goes wrong that can completely derail you, you've gone and thought about how you're going to show up and how you're going to be there. So the visualization piece for me is very, very important. And then I guess, like in a more tactical sense, it's how you talk. And what I mean by that is, when to lower your voice, when to raise your voice, when to slow down, to really draw out the emotion, to get people on the hook. And I'm definitely not saying that I have nailed this or am good at this. This is just stuff, and you can attend courses to get better at this. And Guy is professional, world's greatest speaker courses and that will help you to be like that, because some people are just amazing in front of a camera. And trust me, nobody is brilliant the first time. They have practiced and practiced and practiced. And if anyone has ever seen Leanne's video, she's pretty awesome in front of a camera, to be honest. So,
Thank you.
and it's just through practice. So,
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's literally it. So understand your content, understand your audience. The visualization piece is really, really important. And then just how you talk. But what I also look at, and it's something that we chatted about a few days ago, is I also look at it from the viewer, or the recipient of what I'm saying. And I always ask myself 3 questions when somebody's presenting to me. It'll take away that judgment piece, because, it's well and good to go, oh, that was really entertaining. But what I ask myself is, how can I use this? When must I use this? And why must I use this? And people go, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, what you are delivering, there's going to be something in there for me. Not everything you say is going to be retained, definitely not. And a lot of it might go over my head, again, because I'm quite a simple guy. But if I can get that crux, it's like, when can I use this? How can I use this? Why must I use this?
That's good.
And you really take the meaning. So you're not in the end comparing how Leanne presented or how it went, because you go, but you're actually focusing on what she said and why what she said is relevant to what you want to do. And then how can you maybe do this better, is sort of taking it to that next level.
It's a good sequence of, if you're explaining a process or a model or something else, is actually having those 3 questions in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Because as you said, it's all about the relevancy and targeted to that person. And I think a lot of the great facilitators are the ones that actually understand the problems of the people in their group and can contextualize it to them. Or if they can't, they will ask them the question, like, how could you potentially use this following this workshop? It's that simple. And you don't have to have all the answers. The other thing I like was your point about voice. So I'm listening to an Audible book at the moment. It's Zig Ziglar, The Secrets of Closing a Sale. Now, this guy is like a Texan, 1970s, I think this was all recorded. He talks, so he's got all these like closing strategies. But it's really about, I thought it was going to be like a salesy, but it's actually a lot about mindset and
Awesome.
questions. And the one thing that really stands out for me, and I'll listen to it again, I'm sure something else will stand out, is he has this question where if you're closing a sale and someone says it's too expensive, you pause and you lower your voice and you say, you think it's too expensive? And you do that with everything. And you're basically throwing it back to them to answer their own question.
Yeah, that's
super powerful.
That is fantastic.
And not only for sales, but
yeah,
you could absolutely apply that in a workshop.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a massive art to it. I mean,
I didn't do it. I was grinning when I said it. I can't do it. That was the first time I've said it out loud. But
and I think Americans have a way with sales. They are incredible. I compare them to
Brendan Burchard. He's just, everything he does is he's selling to me without actually selling, but it's just so, you want to sort of just hang out with the guy because it's so...
100%. True story. I think that those sales scripts and that, they've been developed by the top guys because they work. And listen, it's not about conning, because you don't have to give into it. But what we've been saying and what I've been talking about the whole time is that if you want to go better and do better, pay the money to do it. And I think Rich Dad Poor Dad, he articulates, he says, I learned how to buy properties that had been, I think, seized by the government or something like that, and then were being released back. He said he learned how the law works, how the tax works and all that. And he said, the course cost me $70. I've made over 20 million from this. So was the course that expensive in the long run? We're putting a price on knowledge here. I think it's, if you get to where you need to go, which you will do if you put in the right effort and you go the path, the money, like we talk about, is irrelevant.
Well, Jim Rohn, back in the 1980s, he flew out to this conference and he charged $1 million to be a consultant. He goes, but I brought them an extra 20 million in revenue. So it's peanuts to them, right? So it's all relative. Well, I wrote something here about investing in yourself. And that's the other interesting thing. And we'll close this soon. You've been awesome, Dan. With people that are coaches or facilitators, right? So they're selling their expertise or their ability to help someone meet get their goals sorted. But I often ask a coach if I'm willing to engage with them to coach me. Do you have a coach?
Yeah.
And I find it really interesting that some coaches around don't have coaches, but it's like you're selling coaching. And recently I invested in a coaching program for next year. It dropped about 9K. And I was like, oh my gosh, some good questions that I asked myself were, will I get the value out of this? How much, could I X this? And if I want to play big, if I want to turn over $1 million on a course,
How can I use this? When can I use this? Why must I use this?
And I think by the fact that I've invested so much, I'll put in the effort as opposed to, like a $70 course where I'm like, I'll just write it off.
Definitely. You don't have to have a one-on-one coach. Group coaches are great. At the moment, I got a monthly with Brendan. I've got a monthly with Brian Kane. I've got a weekly with Rob Dahl, and then his sort of business partner, the Business Breakthrough. And I think you bang on. Do you have a coach? I think everyone needs a coach personally, and that's my perspective. Not everyone has to agree with that. But I will always have a coach because I've had 2 high-performance coaches prior, Dawn and Rosie, and they were both outstanding. They pushed me to limits that I never thought I could be. And prior to that, I had, sports coaches growing up, and I wouldn't be playing at the level or have played at the level I played at if it wasn't for people coaching me. So I could not put a value on coaching. I think it's absolutely necessary. And yes, I have a coach, and I will continue to always have a coach because it's just so good.
Yeah, it's funny how you pick out different moments of your life. So my coach right now, like Alan just calls me on a lot of stuff, but I need that. I need to be sharpened up, tuned up. Was there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners, Dan?
With 2021, just set the challenge to be your best. Really, really take action on what you want to do and give it a go. A lot of people have probably had what could quantify as the worst year of their life, 2020. What have you got to lose is really what I would suggest. And for those of you that are interested, I will be opening up spots for high performance coaching next year in 2021. So I've been working on that. I've just got to try and find the time with my current full-time job to fit them in. But yeah, check it out on Instagram and that'll be there for you guys.
Awesome. So where should we send them to find out more?
Exceptional Self-Coaching on Instagram. So have a look. We're currently running a Alpha on the Shelf challenge, which seems to be going quite well. I've had quite a good positive feedback. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, check it out. We'll pop Dan's details in the show notes for this one, and I'd 100% recommend signing up. And Dan, you'll have no problem having the side hustle and your full-time job. It's actually a joy, and when I did it, I found that I was putting more into work because you just get so fulfilled from what you're doing outside of it. So
awesome, thanks.
Make you better overall. Thanks so much for being on the show. It's been great chatting.
Thank you, Leah. It's been amazing.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.